Ladies and gentlemen, let me be clear from the start. Being a high-value woman isn't about pleasing others, looking perfect, or playing games. It's about knowing your worth, living with intention, and refusing to settle for less than you deserve. Because here's the truth. Your value isn't up for negotiation. And the moment you start showing up for yourself, the world starts treating you differently. So if you're ready to stop chasing and start attracting, let's talk about what truly makes a woman high value. Let me tell you something that a lot of people don't realize until it's too late. Your self-respect is the foundation of everything you're building. You can have the looks, the charm, the intelligence, the ambition, but if you don't respect yourself, none of it holds. It all starts with you. The way you talk to yourself when no one's around. The way you show up for yourself when things are quiet. The way you enforce your boundaries even when it's uncomfortable. That's a groundwork of a high-value woman. See, self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It shows up in how you carry yourself. It shows up in the standards you set. Not because you think you're better than others, but because you know what you deserve. A high-value woman doesn't lower her standards just to make someone else comfortable. She doesn't shrink herself to fit into someone's idea of what she should be. She stands tall in who she is, even when it means standing alone for a while. And here's the thing. When you don't respect yourself, you start negotiating with people who never deserved a seat at your table. You start bending over backwards for breadcrumbs. You start confusing attention with affection and chaos with passion. That's not empowerment. That's self-abandonment. And the more you do that, the further you drift from who you actually are. A woman who knows her value doesn't tolerate disrespect, not even from herself, because disrespect doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it's that little voice in your head that says, just let it slide. Don't make it a big deal. Be the cool one. But every time you let something slide that cuts against your values, every time you silence yourself just to keep the peace, you're teaching people that your peace doesn't matter. You want to be a woman who commands respect. Start by refusing to abandon yourself in the name of being liked. That approval you're chasing, it's never going to be enough. You're going to exhaust yourself trying to be someone you're not. And the wild thing is, the moment you stop trying to prove your worth, the right people start to see it, because you're no longer hiding behind a performance. I've seen women lose themselves in relationships, in jobs, in friend groups, trying to fit in, trying to be accepted. And when it all falls apart, they're left with this question, what happened to me? That moment right there, that's your turning point. That's the part where you decide you're done betraying yourself to keep the peace. That's when you remember that peace doesn't come from people not leaving. It comes from you not leaving yourself. So what does self-respect look like in practice? It looks like saying no without guilt. It looks like walking away without begging. It looks like asking for what you need and not apologizing for having needs in the first place. It's choosing solitude over being tolerated. It's letting go of anyone who requires you to abandon yourself to keep them. And listen, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy. Respecting yourself in a world that keeps telling you to shrink is one of the hardest things you'll do. You will feel misunderstood. You will be called too much, too distant, too cold. But I promise you, none of that matters compared to the peace that comes from knowing you're not for sale. You're not performing. You're not begging. You're not molding yourself to be digestible. You're just whole. When you build your life from that place, you attract differently. You walk differently. You speak differently. People can feel it. That grounded confidence, that calm clarity, it makes people sit up and take notice. But more importantly, it makes you trust yourself again. So if you've been wondering how to step into your worth, start here. Start with the way you treat yourself when no one's watching. Start with the way you hold your boundaries when it would be easier to let them slide. Start with the decision that you are no longer going to beg for the bare minimum, because self-respect isn't just the first step, it's the standard. Emotional intelligence is one of the most underrated traits a high-value woman can possess. It's not talked about enough, probably because it's quiet, it doesn't shout, it doesn't need the spotlight, but when you have it, you show up differently. You're not just reacting to life, you're leading it. You're not trying to control everything around you. You're in control of yourself. And that's real power. You know what emotional intelligence looks like? It looks like not sending that text out of impulse. It looks like pausing before you speak, not to suppress your feelings, but to make sure they come out with clarity, not chaos. It's being able to say what's true without trying to punish someone for not understanding it yet. That's what changes the game. A high-value woman knows that emotions aren't weaknesses, they're signals. She doesn't ignore them, and she doesn't let them drive the car either. She checks in, she listens, and then she decides. That's the key word, decide. She responds instead of reacts, and there's a big difference. Reaction is survival. Response is leadership. When you're always reacting, you're handing your power to every person who knows how to push your buttons. When you respond, you're saying, I own this moment. You don't. You can't fake emotional intelligence. You can fake confidence. Sure, you can fake charm, but emotional intelligence that's lived, it comes from sitting with your own pain and not running from it. It comes from choosing not to weaponize your words when you're hurt, even when you want to. It comes from seeing someone else's pain, even when they're wrong, and choosing not to match their chaos with more chaos. That doesn't mean you let people walk all over you. It means you know how to protect your pieces without losing your integrity in the process. And it's not just about managing your own emotions. It's about being able to read a room, being able to see past someone's tone and hear what they're really saying. A high-value woman doesn't assume, she observes. She's aware. She doesn't project her pain onto others and then call it intuition. She's done the work to separate her wounds from her wisdom. That's what gives her the kind of presence that's impossible to ignore. Emotional intelligence is what allows you to keep your dignity in the moments where others expect you to fall apart. When someone disrespects you, and instead of matching their energy, you match your ass standard. That's not being passive. That's choosing not to engage in a way that drains you. Because here's the thing, every time you let someone pull you out of character, you're giving them access to a part of you they haven't earned. And the woman who knows her value guards her energy like currency. I'm not saying don't feel things, feel it all, be angry, be disappointed, be heartbroken if you need to be, but don't let your emotions run the entire show. Use them as information, not instruction. Because the most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest one. It's the one who can stay calm, centered and grounded, no matter what's going on around them. People will test you. Life will test you. And emotional intelligence is what keeps you anchored. It's what keeps you from getting dragged into drama you didn't create. It's what helps you choose conversations that build, not destroy. Because a high-value woman doesn't argue for attention. She speaks for clarity. She listens to understand, not just to respond. And she knows when silence says more than any speech could. This kind of control is not about being cold or detached. It's about being so rooted in your self-awareness that nothing shakes your foundation. You become the thermostat, not the thermometer. You set the tone. You decide what energy you let in and what energy you let go. And when you start operating from that place, something shifts. You attract people who respect your calm instead of trying to disrupt it. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to prove your point and start choosing your peace. Because in the end, emotional intelligence isn't about winning arguments. It's about mastering yourself. A high-value woman doesn't live her life trying to perform for applause. She doesn't shape-shift to earn validation or measure her worth by how many people approve of her. She moves with purpose, not performance. There's a difference, and it's a big one. Performance is exhausting. It's rooted in fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being rejected. Fear of being alone. It's the constant pressure to keep up, to impress, to stay relevant. And maybe that's what you were taught. That if you just do more, say the right things, wear the right clothes, play the part perfectly, then you'll finally be chosen. But here's the hard truth. If someone only values the version of you that's been edited for their comfort, you were never chosen. You were cast. Living with purpose doesn't mean you stop caring about how you show up. It means you stop abandoning yourself in the process. A woman who knows her purpose isn't trying to be everything to everyone. She's not chasing popularity. She's following alignment. And when you're aligned, your choices make sense. Even if people don't get them, you're not trying to be understood by everyone because you're not for everyone. You're building a life that honors who you really are, not one that just looks good from the outside. That means your yes means something. That means your no has weight. You're not just saying what's easy. You're saying what's true. And yeah, that clarity will make some people uncomfortable, but you're not here to manage other people's comfort. You're here to live from your core, not from your image. There's so much pressure today to be impressive, to have the aesthetic, to keep the timeline, to check all the boxes. And it's easy to get caught in that current. But when you're performing, you're not present. You're not connected to your own voice. You're just echoing what you think people want to hear. That disconnect, it drains you. That's why so many people look successful, but feel empty. They're performing roles that were never written for them. Purpose gives you direction. When things don't go as planned, it grounds you when people fall away. It reminds you that your value doesn't rise and fall with anyone's opinion. A high-value woman doesn't hustle to be seen. She moves like she already is because she knows this purpose doesn't beg. It doesn't plead. It doesn't ask for permission. And I want you to understand something important. Purpose doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. It doesn't mean you have to start a business or write a book or change the whole world in one shot. Purpose is how you carry yourself in the small moments. It's how you choose integrity when no one's watching. It's how you speak with honesty, how you love with boundaries, how you lead with empathy. That's purpose too. When you stop performing and start living from that place, everything shifts. You stop competing because you're not comparing. You stop explaining because you're not seeking approval. You start trusting that the right people will find you. Not because you danced for their attention, but because you stood firm in your truth. And let me tell you, there's nothing more magnetic than a woman who isn't trying to prove anything. She's not obsessed with being liked because she likes herself. She's not afraid to disappoint people because she's already decided not to disappoint herself. And that kind of energy that's rare, that's the energy that creates impact. So if you've been performing, I want you to ask yourself why. Who taught you that you had earned love? Who made you feel like your real self wasn't enough? And are you willing to let that go now? Because the moment you stop living for their applause, you make space for your actual voice. You come back to yourself, and that's where your power is. Because a high-value woman doesn't just look the part, she lives the truth. A high-value woman is always growing. She knows that becoming isn't a one-time thing, it's a lifetime decision. She's not waiting for someone else to unlock her potential. She's doing the work quietly, consistently, intentionally. And it's not about being perfect. It's about choosing progress over comfort, growth over ego, truth over image. That's what makes her different. She's not chasing some version of herself that fits a trend or a timeline. She's anchored in something deeper. She's asking better questions. She's reflecting, reading, learning, unlearning. She's not afraid to sit with her own thoughts, even the uncomfortable ones, because she understands that clarity doesn't come from noise. It comes from stillness. And in that stillness, she's not judging herself. She's getting honest. Growth is hard. Let's just say it. It asks you to see the parts of yourself that still react, still get triggered, still want to run. But a high-value woman doesn't shame herself for that. She gets curious. She doesn't pretend to have it all figured out. She just refuses to stay stagnant. Every setback, every heartbreak, every uncomfortable conversation, she lets those things teach her, not define her. That's the difference. When you're invested in your growth, you stop looking for shortcuts. You start valuing the process. You stop trying to jump from one high to the next and start building a steady foundation. And that foundation isn't made up of titles or attention or material wins. It's built on awareness, discipline, emotional strength, and self-responsibility. You realize no one's coming to save you, and that's not a sad thing. That's empowering. Because once you own your growth, you stop blaming, stop waiting, and start. There's something powerful about a woman who's committed to learning herself. She's not afraid to admit when she's wrong. She's not afraid to change her mind when new wisdom shows up. That takes maturity. That takes maturity. And it takes strength to not let your pride get in the way of your evolution. Most people stay stuck because they're trying to protect a version of themselves they've outgrown. But not her. She's willing to outgrow it all, even who she was yesterday. This kind of growth touches every area of your life. The way you show up at work, the way you handle conflict, the way you deal with love, disappointment, criticism, success. When you grow internally, your external world starts to shift. You stop tolerating things that drain you. You stop participating in cycles that keep you small, and you stop asking for permission to evolve. You just do it. You also learn to celebrate yourself along the way, not in a loud or flashy way, but in a real grounded way. You don't wait for someone to clap for you before you believe you're making progress. You see your own growth in how you handle things differently, how you speak up now, how you pause before reacting, how you protect your peace, not with walls, but with wisdom. And if you're wondering where to start, it's not some grand gesture. It's not about overhauling your whole life overnight. It's about small, intentional choices. Reading instead of scrolling, journaling instead of venting, going to therapy, saying no when you mean no, owning your triggers instead of blaming people for them. That's the work. Quiet, powerful, consistent work. And that work, it's never wasted. It compounds, it builds something unshakable inside of you. You start becoming the kind of woman who walks into a room and doesn't need to be the loudest because her growth speaks for itself. There's something in the way she carries herself that says that I know who I'm becoming and I'm not rushing it. She's not performing her growth. She's living it. Because in the end, the high-value woman isn't trying to impress anyone. She's committed to becoming someone she's proud of. A high-value woman doesn't chase, she chooses. That right there changes everything, because when you're chasing, you're placing your value in someone else's hands. You're trying to earn space instead of realizing you air the space. You don't chase what you know you deserve. You attract it by who you are, what you allow, and what you walk away from without hesitation. When a woman really knows her worth, she moves differently. Her energy doesn't beg. It doesn't demand either. It simply invites, and then it observes. She's not trying to convince anyone to choose her. She's watching how people show up and deciding if they align with effort, not the other way around. That's the shift from proving to selecting. A lot of people confuse love with pursuit. They think effort means value. But the more you chase someone, the more they'll realize your worth. But that's not love. That's anxiety. That's fear of being forgotten. And the moment you start over investing in someone who underdelivers, you're no longer in a relationship. You're in a transaction. A high-value woman understands that she's not responsible for teaching someone how to treat her. She models it. And if they don't rise to meet it, she doesn't lower the bar, she walks. Choosing over chasing means you operate from a place of abundance, not scarcity. You don't panic when someone pulls away. You don't shrink when things don't go your way. You don't chase closure. You give it to yourself, because you've built enough trust in yourself to know that no one can rob you of what's meant for you. And more importantly, if it costs your peace, your standards, or your self-respect, it's too expensive. This applies to more than just relationships. It's how you approach your friendships, your career, your goals. Are you operating from a place of desperation or from discernment? Because when you chase, you compromise. You settle. You get attached to potential instead of reality. You paint red flags white and call it love. But when you choose, you're calm, you're clear. You're not driven by fear. You're grounded in purpose. And let's talk about the difference between being open and being available to anything. A high-value woman is open, but she's not accessible to everyone. She's kind, but not a doormat. She's warm, but she doesn't let just anyone close. She knows that access to her time, her energy, her heart, that's a privilege, not a default. And people will treat it that way only when she treats it that way first. She's also not in a rush. She knows that chasing is often a symptom of impatience, of needing to fill a void rather than letting it heal. But wholeness teaches you patience. You don't need someone to validate your worth because you already validated it yourself. That's the power of choice. You're not waiting for life to give you something. You're deciding what's worthy of you. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care with clarity. It means you show up with intention, not desperation. You give, but you don't overextend. You love, but you don't lose yourself. And you stay not because you're afraid to be alone, but because the space feels right. That's what choosing looks like. You don't just ask, do they want me? You ask, do I want this for who I am now? Not who I used to be. Not who I'm afraid to become alone, but who I'm growing into. Because the woman who chases is trying to earn value. The woman who chooses already is value. And that's the kind of woman who doesn't just attract the right relationships. She keeps her dignity, whether they come or go. She doesn't collapse when someone leaves. She doesn't perform to make someone stay. She stays rooted in her own standard, knowing that what's meant for her will never require her to shrink, to beg, or to chase. Because a high-value woman doesn't prove herself. She protects herself. So here's what it all comes down to. Being a high-value woman isn't about checking boxes or playing roles. It's not about chasing status, perfection, or approval. It's about becoming deeply grounded in who you are and choosing to honor that woman every single day. You respect yourself even when it's hard. You master your emotions not by suppressing them, but by understanding them. You stop performing for love and start living with purpose. You invest in your growth like your future depends on it, because it does. And you choose not because you're better than anyone, but because you finally realize you don't have to chase what already aligns with your worth. This isn't about being cold. This isn't about being above anyone. This is about being rooted, steady, clear, and unapologetically whole. Because the moment you stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself, that's when everything changes.